assume that people who are in fancy organizations are automatically competent? Or are you more likely to assume that most organizations are not competent and well run? I think that the logical part of my brain would answer that question by saying that, no, I don't think there's a ton of competence. I think a lot of times the more institutionalized something is, the more that you calcify bad decision-making processes. And a lot of times you got fancy paperwork and a nice looking logo and everything, but there's chaos inside most institutions. But the emotional part of me does not respond the same way. If somebody comes at me and they got an outfit on, or if I get a letter, it's bill and there's the nice looking logo on there and they're like, this service is rendered. You owe us $100. You have to send us $100 because service is rendered. Look, there's a date. We have a date on there. It says invoice. It says you have to pay it. And if you don't, after 30 days, and we're going to apply a 3% charge, you have to do it. Even if in the super secret, honest parts of my heart, I look at that and I think, no, that ain't true. I don't think I owe you any money at all. I don't think we did anything together. It's still the paperwork and the logo and the officialness of it all causes me at an emotional level to think, well, I'm probably wrong and made a mistake and probably they've done things right. And because I know that I have this disconnect between the logical part of my brain and the emotional part of my brain, I've started calling more or just asking one follow-up question when people sort of hit me with the authority, this is just how the things are thing. And what I discover is that what I know to be true intellectually, it turns out it's pretty true. That most organizations are not real organized, which is weird because organized, it's right in the name of organization. It's in there. You would think that it would just come with the thing, but it doesn't always come with the thing. And sometimes when you pull back the curtain and you look at how a business or a volunteer organization or a franchise is run, you realize really quickly there's not a plan here. And there are a whole lot of really incompetent, inept, ineffective systems that have just been baked in. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this as well. But likewise, when we get to Esther chapter 8, we get a look inside the decision-making processes of the most powerful government in the history of the world up to the time that this book was written in the 400s BC. And it's not a very flattering look. What we discover is that this decision-making system is the kind of thing that you would figure would be rife with errors and where all kinds of bad judgments would be issued. This is not a great workflow for figuring out what to do with the life and death of all of the people in the empire and the economy and wars and things like this, because this is what we run into. Early on in the book of Esther, we meet King Xerxes, and he's a guy who makes things up sometimes. He operates out of emotion, out of fear, out of insecurity. It's really easy to manipulate him if you act very official and important and string together good words, and what you're saying kind of comes off like it would make King Xerxes look good. He's very likely to say, yeah, so let it be written, so let it be done. We got to do that thing. And so a guy comes along who knows how to play on those strings very well. This is Haman, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And he gets to be in his bonnet and he decides he wants to kill all the Jews and he's going to use the government to do it. He's even willing to put up some of his own money to do it, a lot of his own money to do it. And he goes to the king, sells him on the idea, and the king's like, I don't even want to write the edict. Just take my ring here, just write it in my name, send it out to everybody. Well, that's very, very binding. And now there's basically a 1-year countdown to this date where anybody who doesn't like the Jews is going to get a field day to just go kill as many Jews as they want to, with the instruction to kill them all and take all of their stuff. It's legalized genocide, which is a great reminder that just because somebody does legal paperwork, it doesn't do anything to affect the morality of the situation. But this edict is like a time bomb. Once it started, nobody can turn it off. There's no override switch. There's no manual override. There's nothing you can do. The thing's going to go off. All you can do is make decisions about what you're going to do with the time you have left before the thing goes off, because you can't stop it. And then we get to Esther chapter 7 and chapter 8, and we see that the king is really excited, even going back to chapter 5, that the king is really excited about Esther and banquets, and he's totally delighted in her. And he makes all of these promises to her about giving her a whole bunch of things. It'll be given to you. What's your petition? What's your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. We have him on record as saying that. Earlier in chapter 5, King Xerxes, the same guy, says, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it'll be given to you." So he says that twice there. And then we go over here and we got this banquet going on. And then they're eating, they're drinking, and then, okay, here it is. And he says, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It'll be given to you. What's your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it'll be granted." So 3 times we've got him on record saying, just ask for whatever. I'm fixing to be real generous. And what she asks for, of course, there in chapter 7, is to undo the time bomb that has been set off, that has been activated using the king's exclusive passcode. She says, "If I found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation. If we'd merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." Do you see anywhere in there that she said that her request, the one thing she wants, is petty revenge? Hey, kill Haman for me. I don't like Haman. Kill Haman and give me all of his stuff, please. That isn't in there. She didn't ask for that. Yet, when we look at the rest of chapter 7, that's how it plays out. The king is, I think, very embarrassed that he signed the death warrant very publicly for his own wife. This would effectively be the second time that he got duped into publicly signing a death warrant or an excommunication warrant for his wife. And it gets to the place where you start cracking jokes about like the worst job in the world is being the wife of Xerxes, because if he gets embarrassed a little too much at a party, he's going to tell everybody about that embarrassment in a misguided attempt to save face. And I'll tell you who's going to come out on the losing end is that poor queen. So you sense that he steps out of the room to collect his thoughts and figure out what his play is, and Haman just gives him a free out by breaking protocol and falling onto the couch with Queen Esther, of course. And then the king is able to be like, right there, nab him, get that guy, the couch layer. You can't do stuff like that. Everybody knows it's a violation. Get him out of there. And they put a bag on his head, and they take him away, and they impale him. And then in chapter 8, it says that same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. So that's awesome and everything, except that isn't what Esther asked for. And the king said 3 times that you're going to get what you ask for. What do you want? What's your petition and request? Up to half the kingdom. Tell me, and it will be granted. She didn't say, I want you to kill Haman for me. She didn't say, I want his stuff. Her needs are met just fine. And if Haman lives, but he isn't allowed to kill all the Jews anymore, I suppose that's a trade-off Esther would be just fine with as well. But instead, the king, who is operating not out of selflessness here, but out of humiliation and insecurity, he gives Esther a gift that she didn't really ask for. It seems like she's okay with taking it. I mean, you know, an estate worth more than $250 million and all that authority, I guess you don't turn it down. But now it gets weird, because in verse 3 of Esther 8, the king is acting like, there you go. There you are, just exactly like you asked for. You asked for me to cancel that genocide, so I killed a guy and gave you all of his stuff. And Esther's like, so anyways, but you remember how earlier you were like, ask for whatever, up to half the kingdom, and you'll give it. And I asked for not to be killed, not to have all of the Jews killed. And then you didn't do that. You did something totally different. Do you remember that? It goes like this. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. It's almost like we're doing the whole cycle again. And then she goes on. Now she's more composed because she's been received. If it pleases the king, she said, and if he regards me with favor and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? And this is where we come all the way around back to the thing that we were talking about at the beginning, that question about when you see something that looks a little bit questionable from a really fancy institution, are you more inclined to say, well, I'm probably wrong about things, I'm sure it's very well run? Or are you more inclined to look at that and say, I bet that institution is so big and ingrown and dysfunctional that it's got all kinds of horrible mechanisms for making decisions. And, well, it looks like that's exactly what we're seeing here in the book of Esther. What we've got is a king with all kinds of insecurities and problems who makes big, bold claims. I'm going to give you anything up to half the kingdom. He keeps giving away up to half the kingdom in practically every conversation. People know this about him. So people who have his ear, remember, the ear of the king, access to the king is the greatest form of currency in Persian culture. People have access to him, come to him, and they're like, I want this thing. And then indiscriminately and inattentively, the king's like, yeah, great, go do that. And then somebody else has to come back to him and try to make an argument for the other side. But the king, even if persuaded by that argument, can't undo a declaration he made. So then somebody like Esther comes along who knows the inner workings, the decision-making processes of this institution. And she's like, all right, this is the way we work this one out. We can't just do the efficient thing, which would be to send out a note and be like, there was some confusion on that one, didn't come through and translate. It just doesn't matter. Mistakes were made, not by the king. Don't worry about who actually made the mistakes. No genocide of the Jews. That is off. You guys can't do it. And then send your fastest riders out with that and tell everybody that we're not doing a genocide. You can't do that. Instead, Esther knows that you have to do something much less efficient, which is to countermand that order with another order that completely sabotages the king's previous order. She's asking him to do something that makes it impossible for his previous order to be fulfilled, which is awful decision-making structure. It's awful decision-making workflow for this particular institution. And it looks like, indeed, this is indicative of how things might have worked when you have this kind of absolute monarchy in this time in the world. And so Esther, who's very shrewd, she's proved that again and again. She's paying attention to things. She knows that this is the best way to work the dysfunction of the Persian court toward a good outcome for her people. And we'll see how Xerxes responds to that petition next time around. All right, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.